Hello, and welcome to episode 45 of the Sci-Fi Podcast. From Bloomington, Indiana, I'm Nick Zoutra. On today's podcast, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Anna Alexandrova, a senior lecturer in philosophy of science at the University of Cambridge and a fellow of King's College. Born and bred in Russia, a city of Krasnodar in the northern Caucasus, Anna came of age with the collapse of the USSR, a time of hope and excitement, but also fear, confusion, and anxiety. The teenage uncertainty of not knowing what it means to be kind, cool, feminine coincided with genuine social and cultural upheavals. None of the adults around her had answers to these questions either. She spent the 1990s testing different ways to be in different places, but the pull of the intellectual life was always there, even though it was not valued in her environment. She finally tasted that world at the London School of Economics, where she did a master's in philosophy of social science. Although she had no idea what this field was initially, she fell for it almost immediately. The idea of asking whether there could be a genuine science of people and their communities fit right into the very questions that made the 1990s so painful and so fascinating for her. Now, without further ado, let's bring in Anna. Dr. Anna Alexandrova, welcome to the Sci-Fi Podcast. How are you this afternoon?
Welcome to you too, Nick.
Thank you.
To Cambridge.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm very well, and I really appreciate you getting up so early to interview me with the time change.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's 8:30 in the morning. It's not too bad. Is it a nice summer, or I guess summer, early fall afternoon there in Cambridge?
Yes, the skies are darkening and leaves are yellowing, and the students are about to arrive, and that's always a very exciting time.
Oh, great.
My 7th year here, and it never gets old.
Wow. Okay. So is this, when does the term start?
Term starts later than in USA in October.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's very compressed and intense. So in about 2 weeks is when we'll be welcoming the students.
Oh boy. Well, I hope, best of luck to you in kind of gearing up for that. What have you been up to over the summer? Have you found time to relax, take some breaks? Have you been working a bunch? What have you been up to?
Yes, fair question. Our summer is called a research term. So this is officially are supposed to be doing your writing.
Yep.
And I have been doing that somewhat. I also have 2 young sons, and I take them places and entertain them. I've been to Scotland, and I've been to Russia, where I come from.
Oh, wow.
And I spend time there every summer so that they can learn Russian.
Really? How are they doing with speaking?
Oh, with huge resistance.
Really?
Very.
What's the resistance?
Sometimes they say things like, "Mommy, we are in England, so let's speak English." And of course, I have to resist that and insist on speaking Russian to them, which I think is really valuable, and I'll carry on doing it. But it's really hard.
Yeah,
because their life happens in English.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fascinating. Well, yeah, let's learn a little bit more about the early life. Why not? So why don't we take a step back at the beginning? So Anna, where did you grow up? In Russia, I should say.
Yes, I grew up in a Soviet Union. At that point, in a provincial southern town called Krasnodar, in a family of 2 very young students of civil engineering who were very busy finishing their degrees when I was born. And I was raised by them, plus a devoted small army grandmas and uncles and grandparents in general who had plenty of time for me and gave me a great deal of loving attention and conversation and play. And they were not intelligentsia, but they read books and they really worshipped ideas. Sorry, my phone is ringing.
Oh, that's okay. That's right.
So they passed on culture and intellectual things for me. So this is how I came to ideas. Yeah.
So, really, so can you recall like what kinds of things you were interested as a youth, as someone growing up in that environment?
Well, it's very hard growing up in at the very cusp of collapse of Soviet Union not to be interested in that big thing. Because, so while my parents were not explicit dissidents, they were like very many Soviet citizens, kind of ruefully poking fun at the system and seeing right through the totalitarian state and laughing at it a lot of the time. And the system really didn't have a lot of time left by the time I became aware of it. And when it all came crumbling down in late 80s and early 90s, that's when it was hard not to notice, not to be intellectually excited about the new revelations that were coming in. We read about them in our small kitchens, and we talked about all the things that the world knew that we didn't. And while there were lots of people who I think retreated into cynicism and kind of refused to believe various revelations about what the Soviet system was really, my parents at age 30 embraced it with a gusto. And I'm, of course, very grateful to them for that. They became, it was their duty as they saw it to learn what the world is like, what was hidden from us before then, to approach it critically. So, for example, I remember when an acquaintance in the early 90s offered my dad to buy 3 volumes of Gulag Archipelago, which is a book by Alexander Solzhenitsyn detailing the Soviet labor camps and the history of that. And it had just been published in Russian. Well, it had been published before, but just officially published. And my dad was talking to him on the phone, sort of wondering, what do we really need 3 volumes of Archipelago Gulag? And I remember my mom whispering to dad, my very thrifty mom whispering to dad, we've got 2 girls growing up, of course we need these books. And so this is how seriously they took the education and knowledge and ideas, and also how much they embraced the change and how they really didn't fear it, even though there were lots of people who were. And of course, unlike many other post-Soviet people, I and my family have benefited greatly from the end of the system. I'm a huge fan of Mikhail Gorbachev. My second son is named partially after him. It's a very common Russian name, Mikhail, but I'm very proud to name my child after Gorbachev. So all in all, while they were dramatic transformations, and they coincided with my coming of age, with becoming a teenager, with becoming contrarian and challenging the teachers, challenging the poor teachers at school. Can you imagine a self-righteous teenager who is helped by the fact that the system is collapsing and is challenging the teachers to, update their textbooks and not to teach me any more of their Soviet lies. And that was great fun for me.
Could you give me maybe an example of something that, of coming of age and then coming to understand as, you said you're educating about what some of the rest of the world, or maybe what some of, you're with the help of parents or your own critical scrutiny, you're coming to understand about the state, and how that differed from what was being taught or what was being attempted to be communicated to you. Like, what are some of those things?
Well, the biggest lie that collapsed was that the Soviet system was humane and that it was good to its people, and that the capitalist system was inhumane and it was bad to its people. And of course, neither system is perfect, and right. We shouldn't be uncritical about any one of them. But it was dramatic for Soviet citizens to find out that they were being exploited, fed lies to, and oppressed. And of course, it takes a great deal of critical thought to see that oppression happens elsewhere as well, and there is a right. new type. There are different kinds of oppressions that come from the capitalist and neoliberal system, but it was nevertheless probably one of the biggest revelation was that we were producing things that weren't needed. We were being exploited. We were being lied to. We were being the press was censored. So I think those were the biggest facts which you find out as a teenager, which kind of amplifies the already incredibly exciting time that teenagehood is.
Right. So did you have, were there groups or sort of collectives with which you and other youth would kind of discuss these ideas or kind of collectively get together, or was this kind of something that you did kind of in the, just sort of kind of kept to yourself as you went along?
It was in the air, and I'm from provinces, so it was nowhere near as intensive as it must have been in Moscow and St. Petersburg or other big cities. Sure. But I got to know really interesting foreign teenagers that came to Russia as exchange students, and I myself went to be an exchange student in France when I was 16. To a very kind and generous family near Toulouse, who taught me French and who took me into their life for a year. So I learned what it's like to be a French teenager, and that's probably where I first encountered philosophy in the French high school, which of course. And the French people will be very proud to tell you that they teach philosophy.
In the French tradition. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So what was it about philosophy that you found, or was it at this time that you began to find philosophy, that you began to turn toward philosophy, or, yeah.
It's not a very it's probably a very stereotypical story for teenagers who got interested in philosophy in the 90s to read Sophie's World, which came out at some point in the 90s by a Norwegian writer, I think Jostein Gardner, which was basically a nice kind of psychedelic troll through history of philosophy. And I read that book in French, and I was really very moved by it. And after that, it just, as soon as I would encounter something recognizably philosophical, either in literature or in my school books, it always seemed to move me, always seemed to attract me. Looking back, I can see that what attracted me was often, not particularly paradoxes or logic, although that was always fun, but perhaps the more social thought about how do we organize ourselves as human beings, as collectives, whether it's possible to have knowledge about, scientific knowledge about how society develops, whether it's possible to have laws about it. And I guess I trace back my interest in philosophy of social science, which is my main research interest now, back precisely to those to that combination of my intrinsic interest in philosophy and also the craziness of the post-Soviet, immediately post-Soviet period, when everybody seemed to claim that they were experts on economics and politics, and they thought, Chicago advisors, economists came and told the Soviet Union to liberalize economy. Why? Because they knew the laws of economics, they claimed.
They knew. Everything was resolved, yeah.
And whether anyone knew anything or whether they were all just pretending, whether there is such a thing as social expertise, is probably my long-standing and original interest in philosophy. And although I moved between different projects in philosophy of science, I've always come back to this thought that the big underlying problem in my mind is that I want to believe that there is such a thing as social scientific expertise. I don't think social sciences are fantastically different and somehow, qualitatively distinct from natural sciences. I don't believe in these arguments. But at the same time, I see lots of reasons to be skeptical of claims of expertise about the social world. And if I make any contribution by the end of my career, that's what I hope to be able to say. What sort of social expertise should we be realist about, I guess, to use a technical term in philosophy of science?
Yeah, no, that's really well put, and I can certainly see coming to question the idea of that. Was there a particular social science in the beginning that was it economics? Were there other kinds of sciences with which you were drawn toward, or?
Thank you. All excellent questions. I suppose just the very idea of studying philosophy of social science, where that came from, I should tell you about that.
Yeah.
I saw that London School of Economics had a degree in it. I applied it to this degree because it was a master's degree in philosophy of social science. I applied to that degree because just it sounded incredibly good. Because it had 3 words that I'm interested in: social science and philosophy. And I read a book about it by Martin Hollis, Philosophy of Social Science, I believe it was called. And I went to London School of Economics in 1998 to do that master's degree. And that's when sort of my fate was sealed. I so loved that life, the intellectual life that I saw happening in London.
Yeah,
I so enjoyed, the serious commitment to hard thinking that analytic philosophers are so good at, and I saw. There was no specific social science, but there were a lovely combination of problems having to do with both economics and anthropology. Economics always fascinated me. by its commitment to model-based reasoning.
Sure.
And anthropology fascinated me by its commitment to being able to say something general about human sociality on the basis of a field work with one community. So any one of the social sciences are fascinating and worth thinking about. So by the end of that year in London, I was completely hooked, and I applied to do a PhD elsewhere, and the only place I got in was University of California, San Diego.
Which is an excellent program. But I guess, okay. Well, so maybe before we jump into it, well, you mentioned sort of like the intellectual life in London, and then so you grew up, in Russia, and then went to, at 16, it was in France,
yes.
And then
I spent 3 years in Cyprus.
Oh, wow.
Yes, an island in Mediterranean, yeah. What was I suppose you were asking, what was so good about London's intellectual life?
Yeah, why should folks I'm just generally curious.
Thank you. Here's a really frank answer. I was being a young woman of conventionally valued appearance in the 90s in Russia and southern Russia and Eastern Mediterranean is an experience where you're not just sometimes every now and then sexually harassed. You always are an object, right? You always are. There is just nothing that the rest of the world sees in you except conventional femininity. And I had ideas. I had interests. So arriving to London and seeing, having men and women actually talk to me about ideas and not just seeing me as meat was just incredible. It was fantastic. So London is where I met lots of great friends and future colleagues. And I also met my now husband, Robert Northcott, was a PhD student at LSE when I was a master's student. And that was a very very important point for me of meeting a guy with whom I could talk philosophy and who was a romantic partner as well as as well as really intellectual.
Yeah.
So at that point, the history of the history of London philosophy for me is bounded up with meeting Robert Northcott, who is also a philosopher now. And together we did lots of great things, but one of the main things we did is we concocted together an application for funding to the Open Society Foundation, which supported George Soros's foundation, which supported education of people from post-Soviet area in humanities and social sciences. So that was perfect for me, and that's how I managed to take up my offer in UC San Diego, and that's how I, this is why I am where I am now. That was very important moment in London when we found that scholarship application and when we put it together, and not ashamed to say that Robert helped me with it. And at that point, I just left to America, and that was the next big chapter.
Wow.
It was truly a land of opportunity for me in the way that it's advertised often.
Wow, that's amazing. So did you guys both end up going over to UC San Diego?
Just me. He joined later.
Okay.
After
his studies, I imagine.
No, his PhD is from LSE, and my PhD is from UC San Diego.
Great. So how was your time at in San Diego?
Oh, glorious! Just as you can imagine. It was where I got the thorough and systematic education in philosophy that I always longed for. I spent 6 very happy years there, being taught by wonderful people, having really great fellow PhD students, and really finally doing what I wanted to do, being a PhD student. It was, of course, stressful, and you worry a lot as a PhD student, as I'm sure you know, about what the future holds for you.
Of course.
And will you get a job? Will you have publications? Or will you be going back or going over to a new field?
Right.
And I just kept at it. And I think here's another unglamorous explanation of why some people succeed, and that is because I had no other option. Right? Philosophy had better worked for me, because if it didn't, I would lose my immigration status. I would lose my opportunity to be in the West.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I went to philosophy for the money and for the opportunity to be, not to go back to my hometown, which at that point would have been very sad.
Sure.
So I stuck with philosophy, even though my other colleagues who were, far more talented and just as hardworking as I am, but they had questions about whether it's really for me. Is this really what I want to be doing? I had no such questions, which I think served me well.
Yeah.
And I still don't have such questions. But at this point, the identity of an academic philosopher has grown on me, and there is no going back, and there's nothing I'd trade it for. But at that point, I was doing it because everything was on the line for me. It was an opportunity to be in USA. So, end of story.
Good. Well, so I'm very interested to talk about ideas with you. But before we do that, it sounds like there was some pretty dramatic fashion trying to find some jobs, positions. Can you tell me a little bit about the job search for you, and what was that like?
Thank you. Very eager to share this experience, because I had so much support, and I had so much kindness all around from my teachers, from my colleagues, and I try to give it back now as much as I can.
Great.
The big struggle for me in the world of philosophy was that I never really got interested in anything other than philosophy of social science. So even though that was my constant underlying interest, I always had to dress it up as something else. I always had to dress it up as a more core area of philosophy, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
I had to present myself as a philosopher of science in general with an interest in social science.
Oh, yeah.
Or even, a metaphysician or
oh, boy. Yeah, sure.
Or an epistemologist, whatever it is. It was very early on that, a well-meaning teacher told me that philosophy of social science is a marginal field, and you are setting yourself up for a risk and failure if you say that that's what you are. And of course, the strategic, determined immigrant that I was going to be as strategic as it will take.
Sure.
But intellectually, I never really changed back from, those days at LSE when I first discovered the topic of whether there is genuine scientific knowledge about society. So a lot of my time at San Diego was doing the proper social science and doing my very best work that I could, while also learning how the issues that I'm interested in, how they could be translated in a language that's acceptable to core philosophers, it's very interesting, and it's a perfectly good thing to do, to learn how to explain your interests in a way that would be relevant to others. So I don't regret doing it, and I would recommend my students doing the same, except, I'll fight very hard against this idea that there are core areas of philosophy, and social science is not one of them.
Yeah, no. So I imagine, addressing your work in a different way and communicating in a different way. So in doing this, how much of it is actually, we're philosophers are intelligent individuals. Is there some way that they just kind of accept that, okay, you're now doing general philosophy of science, or is there still this how much can they see that it's like, okay, this is philosophy of social science dressed up as this other thing, or is it the case that like they're you know what I'm saying? Like how much, I guess the thought is that they want to see it as making some sort of general contribution to this whatever core area, right? So I guess I don't know. Yeah, what was your experience with that? I guess maybe communicating, presenting your work to others, the kinds of feedback you got, etc.
Well, it's a really deep issue you're raising, because even though strategically I needed to dress it up as something else, I'm making it sound as if it wasn't, right? As if it wasn't of general interest to philosophers. But in the end of the day, when I think about what I'm proud of and the work I've done, I've done work on use of economic models. I've done work on measurement of value-laden concepts, and I've done work on nature of objectivity and nature of explanation. They happen to be motivated by philosophy, by social sciences, but I don't think social sciences are a distinct kind from natural sciences. I just happen to be really interested in things that are called social sciences. So in the end, my work, I don't think it is not philosophy of science, not general philosophy of science. Model-based reasoning, values in science, objectivity, measurement of things that seem immeasurable, such as well-being. I don't. In the end of the day, that it wasn't as strategic as it sounded at that point.
Sure. Good. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And so I see here, so why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your research projects you were working on while teaching at, it looks like the University of Missouri in St. Louis, and then as a postdoc in the PNP program.
At WashU.
Yeah, at WashU. Yeah, which is also an excellent program, so I've heard.
Yeah. Thank you. So the original PhD project that I worked on in San Diego was on use of rational choice models in economics, in particular use of game theory for institution design, and what that can tell us about the status of economic models and the status of formal models in general. And that was my first project. I picked it out because I really wanted to understand where the authority of economics comes from and whether this authority is justified.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a project that I still believe in, and that I finished. It lasted for about 5 years after the PhD.
Oh, wow.
But I slowly wrapped it up because the other big thing that was on my horizon is the rise of the sciences of well-being. And that's what I mostly learned about when I came to St. Louis, because St. Louis is, as well as a great American city, is home to several excellent philosophy departments. And I just got so lucky that St. Louis was the place where Dan Habron worked. Dan Habron of St. Louis University,
mm-hmm.
who is my favorite philosopher of happiness and well-being. And at that point, he was writing his book, which became Pursuit of Unhappiness, which we read in a small group with some other interested colleagues. And I also learned a great deal from other people in St. Louis, such as John Doris, Simin Vaziri at that point, Gualtiero Piccinini, Eric Weiland, Britt Brogard, lots of really brilliant people who helped me to advance what became a view that I defend about well-being, sciences of well-being, in my current book. A book came out in 2017.
Excellent.
Yes, called Philosophy for the Science of Well-being. So the book started in St. Louis, and that's where I figured out that although philosophers in ethics and in elsewhere like to argue about the proper nature of well-being, what it really is, what happiness really is, how we can formulate necessary and sufficient conditions for it. That's the analytic status quo, I guess, of our methodology. A theory that's immune to counterexamples, a theory that's maximally general. That's when I realized that that's not my project. That's not what I want to do. I saw in social sciences a huge multiplicity of conceptions of well-being, a huge diversity, and I wanted to understand why is it that in the sciences we see the incredible proliferation of constructs of well-being and their measures, while in philosophy we are after the single great big theory. So my book, which was my second project, dedicated to making sense of this. That's although I finished it after coming to Cambridge in 2011, it started in St. Louis, and I credit the core ideas to St. Louis, Missouri.
Fantastic. So let's take a step back and then to really dive into sort of the book and some of your claims. What would you describe to be as the science of well-being? It's partly a technical term, and partly it's already used. So people who position themselves as scientists of well-being are usually economists, psychologists, some public health researchers, psychiatrists even, who are interested in conditions of flourishing, conditions of sort of positive behaviors, positive mental states, and the causal network that surrounds these phenomena. And they, you may have come across the terms such as positive psychology or science of subjective well-being. The science of well-being is a big umbrella term for a lot of projects that are concerned with quality of life, happiness,
well-being, and using very many different terms often to describe that.
I'm generally interested in somewhat of the history of how this became a thing, or how the category, how research, psychological, economic, sociological research came into being or just the social science came to revolve around well-being as this, or as the quality of way of life, as opposed to, let's just say, studying about life, about variations in life, or in how certain things. Like, did you have you come across any of that, or have learned a bit of the history? Or just sort of, I mean, I like you have just been around since the research has come in vogue with things like positive psychology and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I think history of science of well-being is yet to be written, but there are some really very important pieces of the puzzle that are being filled out. So there's a very important article by Eric Agner on evolution of eupathics. The study of happiness is one of the terms. And the key is to realize that although positive psychologists are going to present it as the rise and sort of the revolution so we used to think about pathologies, now we think about goodness. This is a creation myth. Concerns with welfare, well-being, happiness have go back to the very origins of modern social sciences. And modern social sciences, starting up in 18th century, were sciences about conditions for human flourishing, and the flourishing was written very explicitly into them. But there were lots of points through 19th century and 20th century when definitions of well-being either they got redefined in behavioral terms, such as, for instance, consumer behavior, or they got, or they just weren't named as is. And the big rise that we're seeing now, the rise of very rigorous and systematic measurement of psychological states and behaviors that are relevant to well-being. That is a late 20th century phenomenon, and it is very much connected, I think, in a good tradition of social history of science, to the rise of advertising culture and managerialism, and a rise of self-help movement.
Yep.
So that's where it comes from. That's where I would locate it. So it is. It's true that there are certain measures, certain means of measurement that are only coming now that weren't available before. The reason why they are becoming so available and the reason why they're rising so much in popularity is there are social reasons, right?
Sure.
That there is a great deal of science-based, evidence-based, I'm using scare quotes, self-help. There is a rise of life coaching, and there is a rise of really sort of hardcore human resource management tools for how to make workers happy, how to make sure they perform, things like that. So that's my hypothesis about the history of it, but it is still yet to be written.
Great. No, yeah, I could see. Yeah, so that sounds like that would be a worthwhile project, but something that I could, have a hard time not agreeing with some of the sort of the general thought of what you just said. So what do you see as and what have you found to be some of maybe like the top three key philosophy of science issues when it comes to the science of well-being? I mean, obviously, you've mentioned things like measurement and certainly, and multiplicity of concepts, or sort of, and yeah. So what do you take to me? Maybe
let me expand on that.
Yeah, the three. There's so many, but yeah.
Well, let me start with the obvious one. That the biggest challenge to a philosopher of science that comes from the sciences of well-being is that these sciences are not even trying to be value-free. I mean, they are kind of trying, right? There is, in some sense of value freedom, right? They are, of course, there is a hope at, objectivity, and there is a great deal of worries about a responsible attitude to data and things like this, but very explicitly, the very object of these of knowledge here is an object that is evaluative, right? That is an object that could not possibly be described if you weren't endorsing some kind of normative claim about how humans should live. Yeah. I think that's of fundamental interest because you really have to rethink your vision of what it means to have a fact about well-being, a scientific fact, and the relationship between facts and values in the science, I think, is one big thing that brought me to this area.
So psychology is not certain things like psychology, clinical psychology, and psychopathology is certainly not immune to this, and as pretty much any science. But yeah, what do you see as a science that really explicitly is not even trying to be value free? Like, what kinds of other new problems that come about, or do you find something particularly interesting about that?
The sciences. When economists think about how best to measure GDP, how to capture in GDP everything that should be captured, they are worrying about capturing not just the technical term GDP, but but GDP that's worth caring for, right? And which is why all the adjustments to measures, all the measurement improvements that you would see over time, either in indirect measures such as GDP or in more direct measures of quality of life, they are improvements that might have very technical motivations, but their object is to capture better that thing that's worth caring about. Yeah. And I think that's I'm saying that's the big difference. But I would like to see how I would like to see a philosopher of natural science take me up on this claim that improvements in measurement are driven by value judgments in natural sciences too, possibly. Still, I think it's really clear and obvious in the cases of science of well-being, and it's really worth thinking from philosophers of science point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. What about what's the second biggest problem?
Yeah,
second biggest issue. Yeah.
I was trying to think hard as you were talking. Right. Second biggest, I guess. There is a big revival in philosophy of science of measurement as a research project, which I think is a really good thing. And measurement in the case of sciences of well-being is based around the series of techniques that all go under the umbrella term of psychometrics. So psychometrics is originally the science of studying the science of psychological properties. At this point, it's a big, huge technique for all sorts of things, including predicting your sexuality on the basis of your social media profile, and predicting how you're going to vote on the basis of your Facebook likes. But in case of the sciences of well-being, it's the theory of measurement. And how psychometricians justify measures of as questionnaires and subjective measures is extremely relevant and fit for consumptions of philosophers of science, because it raises questions about whether psychometricians go to great length to make sure that the questionnaires fit the patterns of data that they have what's called internal validity or external validity and other kinds of validity. And which ones of these validities counts is something that philosophers are only just starting to talk about. So there's a great work by Leah McClymans, Eric Eimener again, Elina Vessonen, and Brian Hood on how do we understand the philosophical commitments of psychometrics, and I think that's on the rise. And my work is part of that. So that's the second. I'm not sure what am I going to say for the third one. So we've had.
I could help maybe objectivity.
Objectivity is one.
Maybe not the big. Maybe not.
I'm also so I'm also objectivity and the conflict between goals of philosophy and understanding of well-being and goals of science. So whether I've argued in my book that the philosophical goal of figuring out the one and only right high theory of good life is not what's needed for science. Instead, philosophers should be talking about well-being in context, such as well-being relative to specific social kind, such as refugee or a child refugee. I'm interested in pushing ethicists to get more interested in more applied and more precise and more useful theories of well-being. So I guess it's not exactly philosophy of science, it's more my contribution to value theory, but I also think it's an important one.
Yeah, so when I see in some of the book, you discuss things in terms of, is there a single concept? Is there a single theory? What are some of your answers to these questions? So maybe you could just in the very beginning. So we've kind of talked a bit about some of the issues in the science. What about in philosophy?
So thank you for reading my book. I really appreciate that. The answer to concept question is no. I don't think there is a single concept that well-being and related locutions pick out. I think there possibly is certain core properties of a concept. It describes some goodness that is relevant to a particular person. But there's also a great deal of semantic contextualism. So depending on the situation in which we invoke concept of well-being, it takes on distinct content. So that's on the concept side. But on the theory side, about whether or not there are also different states of the world that are appropriately described as well-being, and whether there is a single one, there also I come out on the pluralist side, and I think in terms of the problem, there maybe is a single theory that philosophers will one day find that is to their satisfaction. Sure. But I'm not going to be part of that project because I just don't think it's the right way of spending philosophers' energy when there are such urgent things to figure out, such as what is well-being in gig economy, what is well-being in for a changing climate, what is well-being when you are an insecure migrant, what is well-being when you are depressed, isolated new parent. All of those in all of those cases, I think we should be treating philosophical theories as a toolbox out of which we could build what I call mid-level theories of well-being that are relative to a particular social kind. So I think it would be very socially relevant and responsible of us philosophers to start extending our fantastic skills at building distinctions and systematizing intuitions in this slightly more applied way.
Yeah, and speaking to that. Is there a particular area of well-being that you have been, most interested in perhaps working in an applied way?
Well, all this time as I was working on these issues, I got pregnant sometimes in St. Louis and had two
Congratulations.
babies in quick succession. Who are now 7 and 10. And that experience of parenthood really colors lots and lots of things for me, philosophy-wise. It's extremely difficult when you see a baby to think about well-being as fully informed satisfaction of fully informed desires, or well-being as capabilities, or well-being as net pleasure, as hedonists would. What it means for a child to be well is a wonderful philosophical question that I obviously ended up thinking about because it was so much on my mind and on my hands and on my body. So one of my chapters is dedicated to articulating a theory of well-being for that distinct kind of creature that children are. And maybe as they grow up, I'll become less interested in it. But right now, it's pretty vivid.
Yeah, this is something. So that's fascinating. I would be interested in seeing a science of childhood well-being, or what it means to be well as a child.
Well, if you think about it, that's what developmental psychology is about.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what social work is about. And there is this enormous range of social sciences, social/medical/policy/psychological sciences that are exactly about those things. But, philosophers are only now beginning to wake up to their philosophical significance.
So maybe we can get clear on what, for others who, might hear this or who are studying on the periphery of things and say, this is actually something I would like, or maybe even folks who are more interested in measurement specifically or more interested in validity, but then they're like, well-being science is something that could be very fruitful in exploring it or applying my other ideas in the philosophy. Like I don't know, how would you recommend them going about and approaching the topic, or what kinds of contributions you think could still be are still looking to be explored?
Thank you for asking. Obviously, I'm a biased, but I hope informed advisor on that. I think of my book, A Philosophy for the Science of Wellbeing, is exactly that, a manifesto for what would a philosophy be for that science. And there is a list of issues that I think are still overdue, and that is figuring out what is the role, what is the appropriate attitude to psychometrics, what is the appropriate attitude to involving people into science, right? So that's it seems a hallmark of a responsible science of well-being that it would be a science that respects the priorities of the people that it is studying. It seems very hard. It's very hard to see how a good science of well-being would not be a science that takes seriously the input of the people that it is studying.
Yeah.
And that movement of public participation in science and democratization of science is very familiar to philosophers of life sciences and philosophers of environmental sciences, and how these I think public participation in science and the ownership of scientific knowledge by both by sort of its subjects and its purveyors, the scientists, is a really important question. And I think also philosophers are beginning to speak about it. Obviously, people like Heather Douglas, Kevin Elliott, and Philip Kitcher have been very important in putting this on the agenda. But on the philosophy of social science side, for me, I think we haven't done that quite enough on the human and social sciences. So my big influence, going back from to UCSD and LSE, is Nancy Cartwright, who at some point, to whom I at some point confided that I'm worried. I outed myself as a philosopher of social science and said I'm very worried about that.
Yeah.
What do you say? And she said, philosophy of social science is the future of philosophy. And that was my. She could say such big things, right? And it was a performative statement in part, right? Because by saying that to me, she was encouraging me to keep going in that in that area, and I'm very much carrying the flag.
That's
at
great.
This point.
Well, that's so I'm looking on here in terms that, and you mentioned something in terms of philosophy should not be looking to develop. Well, the sciences should be open to multiple concepts, and that philosophy should develop mid-level rather than high theories underlying these concepts. Could you give me an example? Like, what would be an example of like a higher theory of well-being as opposed to like a mid-level theory?
Yeah. Well, probably the most popular high-level theory of well-being is subjectivism, which is a view that what it means to do well is to fulfill some set of deeply held priorities that an agent has. And that's usually contrasted to various objective theories of well-being, which are either hedonism, such that life is good to the extent that you have greater amount of pleasure than pain, or Aristotelian theories, life is good to the extent that you are living a life that's fit for a human being. So these are classic high theories, and I think they are extremely important and useful, and I think of them, however, as tools in a box. I think there is no point trying to figure out what is the single unifying theory that captures all of these ideas together in some maximally succinct and systematic way, and the contrast between the high theories and mid-level theories is precisely high-level theories are thinking about the individual in general, or creature in general, all things considered, whereas mid-level theories of well-being, the ones that are most relevant in sciences and policies, are theories that are relative to a very specific social kind, such as say, child refugee.
Sure.
That's the best. That's the distinction between high theories and mid-level theories, as I see it. Some people ask me why I don't talk about low-level theories of well-being, and I'm sure those exist. But at this point, I was hoping to at least get to the mid-level and see if I can get any further later.
Right. So what would you say, has there been any, what has been perhaps some of your biggest pushback or criticism from about the book?
They're all very good criticisms.
Well, exactly. Right? Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Yeah, no, there's some hopeful, discussion or points raised to further think about or to respond to. Yeah, that's what I'm curious about.
I've had 3 or 4 extremely generous and thoughtful reviews. In each case, they raised questions about, and I've had a wonderful Author Meets Critics session at the Pacific APA, and in each case, we pushed on the very same old buttons that you would imagine, whether the division of labor between philosophers and scientists should be the way I claim it should be, or the way it is traditionally, whether my defense of pluralism about theories, which in the book is called variantism, stands up to scrutiny. I'm grateful for the objections, and in many of those cases, I probably, on further thought, I would be quite happy to accept them and admit in places where I overstated things or got them wrong. But my excitement about philosophy, I think, is more about opening new questions rather than sorting out old ones. So I'm quite happy to, I would be very happy if the outcome was that I was wrong, but at least there are now people talking about something that I care about, rather than, I don't have to be right. I just have to change the agenda of philosophers. That's my goal.
Fantastic, man. That's great. So I saw you had written a post, and perhaps you could describe a little bit about this, and then we'll get on to sort of current and future work. Just a nicely titled article, "Is Well-Being a Number?" Mm-hmm. So yeah, certainly the case that we want to know maybe like how well am I doing, or can we put a number or a measurement related to how well others are doing? So yeah, what do you have to say, or what is kind of your thoughts behind the potential or the possibility of measuring well-being?
Thank you. That post is a summary of the last 2 chapters.
Perfect. Well, that's great. And
I am, but not only. I'm interested in. It's such a fundamental question about what it means when you put a number on things that you initially thought were qualitative and non-numerical, and whether well-being is essentially qualitative or quantitative. These are really big fundamental questions. My own take on it is, again, the question should not be whether well-being is really quantitative or whether it really can truly be captured by a number. Rather, what do these numbers do in the social sphere, right? Yeah. Are these well-being could be represented by a number that is hopelessly simplistic, right, and is too unidimensional and is nowhere near rich enough to represent the richness and the complexity of a person's life. Nevertheless, it might be better to have this rubbish number than to have GDP as a stand-in for welfare. So the other big frontier that I hope philosophers will start talking about is when we evaluate measurement, we should evaluate measurement not only by its representational qualities, about its ability to represent the object of study, but also by its performance as a speech act, right? What does this number do in the social sphere? Does it call our attention to something that we didn't used to worry about? Does it function as a better social coordination tool than previous numbers, or than
Sure.
whatever else we used to be thinking about? So my hope is in talking about measurement, we start. It was just right to think that the core of measurement is representation. That was the initial statement by Pat Sipes and his collaborators, and that's what the best philosophy of science work on the topic by Basson Frost and Eran Tal is about. It's about the representational quality of measurement, but it's not all measurement does. Measurement also helps us to coordinate our actions and to set up expectations and to develop agenda as a community, as a society. So philosophers therefore should not evaluate measures only on its ability to represent.
Excellent. Okay. So now that the book has been published, is out, and everybody should read it. What's on the horizon, or what is currently? Are you kind of following up with? I imagine once you write a book, haven't yet, but once you do, I know it's kind of nice to take a little bit of a break, kind of relax, kind of set things down. But yeah, are there further papers or further research, maybe more specific into a particular aspect of well-being, or what are you up to now?
Thank you. Very exciting. As you say, exactly, when you first submit the manuscript and you've done your index and you've done your everything else, there is that first few months of not knowing what to do with yourself. What projects do I really have? What do I really care about? And then it took me about a year to really wake up to what I think will be my third project at this point. And it's kind of back to basics, really, back to that initial big fascinating question that started me off, and that is whether there is such a thing as social expertise. But it's also not that back to basics, because social expertise is changing now a great deal. It's becoming more driven, and it's becoming more automated, right? So the rise of predictive analytics and machine learning algorithms that are based on enormous amount of data are really changing what we claim to scientific knowledge to be, and what social sciences look like, right? So imagine that the social science that gets the most glory now is, our ability to predict personality traits on the basis of Facebook likes, rather than our ability to, understand a particular tribe and its way of life. What are we to make of this enormous changes that social sciences and expertise in general is going through? Does that mean the judgment of the individual social sciences becomes less important if predictive analytics becomes the sine qua non of social science? Or will social sciences remain as diverse and kind of disorderly as they used to be, and for me, disorder is not a bad thing. I think I'd like my next book and my current project to really, in part, return to those original questions that brought me to philosophy. Yeah. Which is whether there is a social science of society, whether there is a science of society, and what form it would take, but also consider these new developments in automation and AI as potentially changing what we count as social knowledge.
Fascinating. All right. Well, we're looking forward to this.
Thank you, Nick.
All right. Well, why don't we conclude with the question I've been asking many of our guests, which is, what do you see the greatest challenge of philosophy of science today?
Wow, brilliant. Well, I should go back and re-listen all of your interviews. It would be really fun to see what my colleagues had to say on that. I think greatest priorities of philosophy of science is to be responsible, ethically responsible, and that means a lot of things. It means responsibility towards our students, towards both undergraduates, of course, and our ability to pass on the richness and the importance of philosophical thinking about science to the new generation of scientists, and our ability to take good care of our graduate students. We need to change the status quo of thinking that making success in academia is the only way of making success. Yep. We need to make sure that the new generation of philosophers of science are not oppressed and brainwashed by all sorts of academic rubbish, so to speak. Right? They need to have lots of transferable skills to be confident to leave academia, but they also need to, of course, be. So I don't think we should be prioritizing academic success for our graduate students. Is the other big part of responsibility. And finally, the third constituency to whom we are responsible is our public, people who are interested in what scientific knowledge is and how it develops, and what attitude we should have to it. So a lot of our colleagues, yours and I, are rising to the challenge of thinking about false belief and spreading of fake news and spreading of skepticism about science, and these are we need to keep thinking about it. I teach butter, Kuhn Popolakatos course here to the young scientists in Cambridge, and it's very easy when you teach those old debates between, say, Lakatos and Feyerabend, to see how they were really colored by the politics of the 60s, right? The rise of the student movement and the Cold War, and the worries about Nazi science. In a way, we need to reinvent philosophy of science for our age, because our age has a different set of problems. And I think it was just right that Lakatos and Feyerabend were responding to issues of their day, and it's just right that we should as well. It doesn't mean we shouldn't teach them. It's great fun to teach Lakatos Fire Robin debate precisely in the age of climate skepticism and and rejection of scientific expertise at all sorts of level. But we need to teach it differently, I think.
Yeah,
that's our next big responsibility. So those three things.
Wonderful.
Other than that, nothing much.
No, those are huge. Ethically responsible, success for the students, and within eye and ears toward the public, which I think is certainly the case, and it's certainly the case with your research. I must say I've been very impressed, and I'm really looking forward to further diving into this well-being and seeing how it might even connect with those who end up continue to do the science and study it, as well as your future work in the social sciences.
Well, thank you, Nick, and you are doing your bit too as well. So I appreciate
doing my best.
You are,
hopefully trying to engage, connect those philosophers of science with the general public or other generally educated listeners. So, doing what I can.
Thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing. Best wishes for success.
Thank you very much, Anna. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Good luck preparing for the semester or for the quarter, we'll be in touch.
For the term.
I'm sorry. Where are we? They are not semesters. We're at Cambridge. Come on. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well,
best wishes, Nick.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.